to Purpose Driven Progress. Today, we are going to be talking about diving into your why, what it is, and how do you find it. So let's get going. So today I'm going to tell you a story, honestly, probably one of my favorite stories to tell, of a guy named Desmond Doss. Now, Desmond Doss was a Marine Corps medic back in World War II. And the really interesting thing about Desmond is that he was a conscientious objector. Now, for those of you who aren't, kind of history nerds like I am, a conscientious objector is someone who either refused to serve in the military or, like Desmond, someone who would serve in the military but would refuse to carry a weapon. Now, honestly, whenever I tell this story, I just kind of always think about that. Like, imagine being a Marine in World War II and the one guy in your unit who his sole task is to make sure that if you get hurt, he's supposed to save your life or heal you and help you out and get you to safety. That guy refused to carry a gun. And that's a wild thing to think about, right? I mean, imagine, I have to think like I would probably feel some distrust to somebody like that. Like I would not feel comfortable in that kind of a situation. But Desmond served in the Marines, like I said, and he served in the Pacific Theater, specifically in Okinawa in a battle called Hacksaw Ridge. Now, Hacksaw Ridge was this cliff, essentially, that him and his unit and all these other guys had to climb in order to get the enemy off the top. They were dug in trenches and in caves and in bunkers they had built on top of this ridge. Now, I'm not talking about like a hill that you can just kind of walk up. I'm talking about a true sheer cliff. This cliff was 400 feet high, 400 feet, taller than a football field. Now imagine staring up at this thing, realizing that you have to climb up these cargo nets hand over hand. And whenever I picture these cargo nets, I always think of like the rope that you have to climb in gym in high school. That kind of like that rough rope that's, like a couple inches thick or whatever. Climbing up ropes like that, hand over hand for 400 feet. That's 40 stories climbing up hand over hand with the rest of your guys. And there was probably, it wasn't super comfortable, I'm sure. It was probably digging into your hands uncomfortably. And then once you got to the top, it was just desolate. It was, it would have been covered in smoke. So imagine that. It was so smoky that it would have been, covering the sun. So it was like that hazy kind of look. And there were shattered trees everywhere because every time the U.S. military got thrown off of the top of this ridge, they would call in a Navy airstrike to bombard these Japanese positions over and over and over again. So there was big craters and shattered trees everywhere. And once you got to the top, your guys were there. Everybody was breathing super heavy, but your guys start to move around, start to form their ranks, their units to start looking for the enemy forces. The air would be thick with the smell of smoke, gunpowder, and probably sweat and blood because people were struggling, fighting, and dying. Now, as the battle progressed, Doss and his people, they got repelled. They got beaten by the Japanese and they had to retreat. So not only did you have to climb up 40 stories to get on top of Hacksaw Ridge and to fight the enemy, but then after fighting for however long, you start to get defeated, your men get beaten, and you have to climb back down 40 stories to get away. Now, after this particular battle, Doss didn't leave. Instead of climbing back down 40 stories, he could hear the men in his unit and others crying out for help because they had been hurt, they had been injured, and they had been left behind as the rest of the battalion retreated. So just think about that. Just think about how that would feel if you were Desmond Doss. Here, your men, the men you're supposed to be protecting and helping to get to safety, and the men you're supposed to be, saving in the field to get to the hospital, are calling out for your help. So Doss stayed. And just as they had in other defeats, the commanders called in the Navy bombardment. So there were literally explosions going on around you. And Doss stayed. You could still hear the soldiers crying out, and Doss stayed. Imagine how loud that must have been. His mouth would have been, caked in dirt and dust from the explosions. He would have been so thirsty, I'd have to imagine. Now, he started to find injured soldiers and he started to carry them to safety on his own. And every time he got one to safety, he prayed, Lord, please let me get one more. Lord, please let me get one more. And over the course of the time in Okinawa, Desmond Doss saved 75 men. Over and over and over again, he saved these guys because he knew he was doing what he was supposed to be doing. He said, please, Lord, let me get one more. Now, our battles in life in the business world very often aren't similar to Desmond's, where we're not, dodging the shelling from the Navy and trying to save guys that have been shot and hurt. But sometimes they are. But usually our battles in the working world are our personal relationships, the struggles we have at work with our families, because very often we can stand in our own way through fear or doubt. And honestly, this is what I wanted to share with you guys today. So this story really, really resonates with me. It's really important to me because that's the prayer that I pray every day. Please, Lord, let me help with us one more. Now, I'm a coach and a speaker, like I say in a lot of my podcasts. That's what I do for a living. But that's why I put out a podcast like this. That's why I'm on social media probably too much, because the truth is that I don't know what it is that I might say, even in passing, that will resonate with somebody. And that's why finding your why, I think, is just so, so, so important. So let's find a way so you can fight your battles and win. Let's find your why. Now, Simon Sinek, he's a speaker as well. He's written some really, really great books that I will link in the show notes. But he defines your why as the contribution you make to the world. It encompasses both your professional and personal purpose. It is a reflection of who we are as individuals. And I'm going to say it again. Your why is the contribution you make to the world. It encompasses both your professional and personal purpose. It is a reflection of who we are as individuals. So it sounds pretty important, right? Sounds pretty heavy. Now, I want to tell you that it's okay if you don't know your why, even after we go through some of these questions and some of these exercises, because finding your why isn't something that you can do for 10 minutes before your friend shows up for coffee. Finding your why is something that can typically take a little bit of time, and that's okay. But finding the place to start, finding your journey is really, really important, and that's what we're going to get started today. Now, your why for me, I think it's one of those things when things get really tough, things get really hard. The why is the thing you come back to that will allow you to keep moving forward. It's the thing that drives your goals, your dreams, your ambitions. It allows you to keep fighting. And sometimes, I know for me personally, sometimes when I didn't know my why, I had what I call a soft why. And usually a soft why, at least in my experience, is money. Meaning that particularly a lot of times in like my early, mid, and later 20s, I was just looking for some ways to get promoted or find a new job that would allow me to increase my paycheck. And I'll tell you that a paycheck is not nearly good enough that when things start to really kind of hit the fan, and when you've got, crap up to your waist and you're feeling stressed and overwhelmed and you're just wondering like, should I even bother doing this? Should I even keep going? A soft why will usually mean that you're going to quit. And that's okay. It's okay to quit sometimes because we need to find those big, deep reasons of why we need to keep moving forward. And sometimes we're just in the wrong situation. So first, I want you guys to reflect on your passions and your interests. So ask yourself questions like, what gets you excited? Like, what's something that you would wake up for in the morning, just feeling excited, ready to go to dive into the work that you have for that day? Think about those things. Identify some of your core values. So think of a pivotal moment in your life. So we all have a few of them, but think of some of those moments like you really realize that maybe you're on the wrong path or just something really shifted in your life in a big way that puts you on a whole new trajectory. Think about some of those things and what characteristics come up from either from yourself or from those around you. And recognize your strengths too. So what are you really good at? So what do you pick up with very little instruction? And consider more importantly, how you can serve others. This is really, really important because how you impact others will really kind of determine if you will be able to move forward when things get hard, when things get tough. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean becoming, a world-class doctor and serving in, every third world country. It might, but it doesn't necessarily mean that. Because what we do extends beyond yourself, means much deeper for fulfillment over the long term and even in the short term too. Then when you've done all of this, craft a why statement. So combine all your reflections into a concise statement. Now, again, this isn't something can't answer all of these questions and find really, really quality answers in just 10 minutes before coffee. This is something that can take time and it can take input from the people around you. And that's absolutely fine. But again, finding that starting point to get the journey kicked off is key. So I want you guys to get going. That's all I've got for you guys today. So I know this was a little bit of a heavier one, but thank you so much for listening. As always, it really does mean the world to me that you guys, share a little bit of time with me and are interested in what I have to say. So it means a lot. So I'll include links to Simon Sinek's book, to start with why, in the show notes, and also include a link to they came out with it's an action World War II war movie about Desmond Doss called Hacksaw Ridge a handful of years ago, and it's a fantastic representation of what he went through. I'll include links to both of those things in the show notes. If you'd like to discuss your why further with me, either one-on-one or if you have a group that you think could benefit from finding their why, so please go to my website in the show notes for more. So I'd love to discuss those things with you guys. So look forward to hearing from you, and I'll see you guys next time.